What do we want to call this episode before we start? Stimulus bill? Because I think that's kind of
Stimulate this.
Stimulate this. No, we're not talking about erotica. We're talking about the stimulus bill.
And then you see like listener drop just like, how come people only made it through the first 24 seconds?
Our episode got flaccid.
Yes. Yes. That's it. Well, welcome everybody to today's flaccid episode.
Hopefully not. But I think this conversation will be quite stimulating, pun intended. Today we're talking about the recent COVID-19 stimulus bill that recently just got passed. And I know my attention was piqued when you saw those memes going around about like all this foreign aid and happening, and I'm like, what the fuck? So, you know what we do every week? We dig into stuff we don't know about, and we try to kind of share thoughts and opinions and know a little bit more in a period of about an hour. So hopefully we don't make too much of fools of ourselves and come to some interesting conversations.
Challenge accepted. Yeah, absolutely. And it's interesting. I had seen some memes and stuff too, like just really calling into question why certain things were included in the government bill. But if I'm being completely honest, the social media posts and such that I came across were lacking detail.
Yeah.
Like it was about as broad as my previous statement. And I just couldn't find anything from the social media posts or the content that was being spread rapidly that really targeted specific things. And then the other part of it is we have a long history of sending financial aid to other countries and helping rebuild. And I think a lot of it's probably in the name of democracy or other interests. But I'm curious, Tony, did you come across anything in particular that really stood out or felt like it was out of the ordinary and unexpected?
Yes, but that just comes from my ignorance in this space. I'll be honest, today and the past couple of days as I've been digging into this is the first time I've really looked into shit like this. It's been the first time that it's piqued enough of my interest. Maybe I'm getting old and I care about the shit now. I don't know. So all of it was out of the ordinary because I have no baseline. But as I dug in a little bit, none of it seemed so as damning as social media made it out to be. Mm-hmm. One website, or that one that talked about this many millions to this country, this billion to this country, and then $600 for the American people. That's pretty fucking damning, right? And those numbers, as I dug in, I could be wrong, but from what I could see, those numbers are accurate, but it's just misleading. I think we saw that. I think it's important to differentiate all at once. There was the $900 billion stimulus bill and the $1.4 trillion omnibus package that got passed together all at once. And what I learned today was the whole omnibus thing it's basically just a collection of bills all passed at once under one signing. So I think there was 12 different bills that got signed all together on that. And all of that foreign aid stuff was just the extension and funding of the government. And the stimulus was kind of a different thing. It got tied together because they were all signed at once, but it's misleading to say, look, we passed a stimulus package that sent money to other countries, because that sounds fucked up, but it wasn't necessarily as fucked up as it sounds.
Yeah, it's not that clear cut. And yeah, so the omnibus bill was $1.4 trillion, like you said, and that basically just sets aside and allocates funds for the federal government to run for the rest of 2021. Mm-hmm. I think it actually starts like for the fiscal year. I could be wrong on that.
No, I think that's right.
But yeah, it's definitely interesting because like in today's news cycle, people are exposed to so much information that may be valid, but it's coming from a source that's trying to push a narrative. Mm-hmm. And I'm not saying that the narratives that we came across aren't valid, because there were thousands of pages in these bills. And so the senators who voted for this did not read the full list of bills that they're voting on. And that's a whole nother problem that we'll talk about.
Yeah.
But I would be thoroughly impressed if somebody who's posting some of this stuff on social media read the whole bill and understood all the context around everything that's in it.
Right. Well, and think about how just the nature of news and news sites or any type of advertising sites. How do they work? They work by having content that's valuable, and that value can be attributed 1,000 different ways. But the quickest way to create value is clicks. If you get people to come to your website, share your content, well, then you're going to see the advertisements, and that's where you get your money. So from a financial standpoint, it makes sense to put shit out there that's trendy, clickable, edgy, so that people come to your information, whether it's true or not, because you're getting your ad revenue through that.
Even at risk of damaging your brand.
Right.
I mean, there have been times where even some of these really reputable sources like the New York Times have posted some things that are just not great. Like if anybody goes back and looks at the PewDiePie scandal a few years ago, the New York Times tried slandering Pewds, and it's worth diving into, but it damaged their brand in a pretty big way. And so if you're a smaller publisher, you run a social media site, we know how memes get spread around. They're so viral. I shouldn't say nobody. Most of us don't take the time to actually dissect everything because, as we've said before on other previous times during this podcast, nobody has time to go through all of this and figure it all out.
Well, in that meme sharing, it's not the information necessarily that people share, it's their emotional response. And so most of the time it's going to be humor and, oh, that was fucking funny to me. Oh, that's hilarious. Or, oh shit. And you quick share. And I think there's a certain value in that, but I think we have to realize that some of this stuff isn't information the way we think it's information. It's comedy or humor or more in that realm.
Yeah, certainly. And yeah, so it all comes with the tone, and you got to know who you're following, I guess.
Right.
So in the bill, just generally speaking, I mean, it had things like funding for school systems.
Before we jump into what's in the bill, I want to go a little bit more high level.
Yeah.
It was almost 5,600 pages, right?
Only?
Yeah, only. And so just for a little bit of context, the Harry Potter series, all 7 books, has 3,407 pages. Basically, it's the equivalent of reading the entire Harry Potter series twice. Not quite twice, but still close to that, in order to read through every page of this bill. And they had the quick fucking turnaround time of, you got to get this done in a couple of days, or we're trying to make these change. If you're a senator or House representative trying to make an educated decision on whether this is good or bad or different pieces of it to change, how the fuck do you do that?
Yeah, how can you actually have an articulate argument and deliberate on whether or not this bill needs to be passed? I think if you're in that position, you're saying, oh, this is to fund the government, and if it doesn't get funded by the deadline that we were provided, non-essential government workers get shut down. Sounds like we're going to try to make some moves. And you heard about this over the past couple of years. I think it's happened 2 or 3 times, and it may have been a trend long before that, and I just became of age and actually started paying attention to it, just like you kicked off earlier. I can't fault them for trying to push something through, but at the end of the day, it's their responsibility to maintain government and keep the order as is, and really deliberate on how we're using tax dollars and what we're actually promoting for the good of the country and for the good of the world.
And to throw some favor in their direction, sure, it's been a weird fucking year, and hard shit's happened, and then extra people need money, and so it adds extra stress and weight and things that aren't in a normal year. As far as trying to send out economic relief and what that looks like and what's healthy. There's 1,000 different opinions on what that looks like, but still, it wasn't just, oh, we need to make sure we have funding for the government. Now it's all this other shit too.
But I'd also say let's not pretend like they didn't know that they were going to have to pass a bill by the end of the year to fund the next year of the government. And I would buy more into that if it hadn't happened the past couple years also.
You're right. I was just trying to be nice and have a fair, balanced argument, but you're right.
Your point is valid. Like, I think it's very accurate that they had a lot on their plate. I mean, they had to figure out how to hold Congress virtually, and so yeah, there's some leeway involved, but this is a trend, and and I'm just disappointed. I feel misrepresented. I feel like there isn't enough accountability. And I also don't want to be the type of person that's like pointing out all the things that people do wrong and not offering solutions, because I'm not in their shoes. I don't know what they have to go through. I don't want to be in their shoes. I don't want to get attacked by an angry mob.
2022, vote Nick Johnson.
Don't vote me. Like a hard pass. Can you just turn down the inauguration?
I don't know. That's a topic for a different day.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate all the support, but I'm just gonna have to call it off.
Look for what is that shit called?
A ballot?
Nope.
I threw you one lifeline.
I know. It's that shit where they're trying to go like promote for an election. What's that shit
Campaigning?
Called? Campaign t-shirts for Nick Johnson. There we go.
We'll throw up some campaign t-shirts.
We're not going to do that. I was just trying to make you sweat, bro.
Yeah, I'm already sweating. It's hot in here.
It is hot in here. I've seen already taking off clothes. We're like 2 minutes into this episode.
Yeah, damn. We were talking about it not being flaccid. Just hold on. Tony said, hold my beer.
Yep.
Oh, good stuff, man. Good stuff.
So you wanted to talk about some of the stuff that was in this bill. You were talking about like...
Only if you're ready, sir.
I'm ready. I just wanted to talk about that. There's a lot to talk about in this bill because all those pages.
Before we do get into that, do you know how many days they had to digest this?
Not officially, but I remember seeing some stuff back when it was happening of, stack yay tall, 18 inches being that 5,600 pages, and them going, this is what I have to read through. There's no way I can read through all of this in the time frame that we have. I don't remember what that time frame was. So there's a couple of days, even a couple of weeks. Let's be honest. If all you do without sleeping or eating or shitting, I just read through this. If you're a speed reader, maybe. But to read that, and then try to have conversations about all the notes that you find that you dislike or the things you do like and have points ready to argue for when someone doesn't like and you have to defend your position. How the fuck?
Yeah, how can you debate every one of these items?
You can't.
Yeah, and that's a problem. And to be fair, some of those pages are dedicated to non-discretionary spending like Social Security and Medicare, et cetera, or Medicaid. I actually don't know the difference between the two. I know that one's like a federally sponsored one. Whatever one is federal.
Let's be fair with that. Let's cut the shit in half, right? You're still talking 2,800 pages.
Sure. It's a big ask.
Yeah. Hard to pass.
And then they're, yeah, I'll leave that comment to the side. Yeah, know your limits, right?
Right.
So going through some of the bill, I mean, obviously, Tony and I, one, aren't lawyers to understand what we are even reading, and two, didn't read the whole fucking bill.
No way.
But with that being said, there were a lot of things that I thought seemed valuable, and whether or not I agree with how we should be spending some of our money, that's a whole different conversation on each one of these items. But at least like I can find some merit in things like providing health insurance, allocating funds to coal miners who can't mine coal anymore because the industry's going bankrupt, or researching nuclear energy, geothermal, and more renewable energy, maintaining like harbors, and that helps military, fisheries, all of that stuff.
Now, all this stuff that you're listing, was this in the omnibus portion or was this in the stimulus portion?
In the omnibus portion.
Right. And so I think without the context of knowing what these things were and how they worked, I know for myself, at least before I started digging in and trying to figure out before we were going to talk about it, I didn't know that they had to pass something just to keep the government. And maybe that's just my ignorance not paying attention. So, this was a special stimulus thing. Why are they doing all of these other extra things? And I think that was a big perception. Why is this money going to the Smithsonian? Why do they need more money right now? We've got our actual citizens out here hungry, needing help. Why aren't we helping them? Because that was the narrative that intentionally or unintentionally was being pushed around.
Sure. And that's a good angle. So I understand the perspective that you're coming from. And I think I probably would have had the same had I not been exposed to the previous omnibus bills that have happened at the end of, 2019. 2018, I think, was one of the years where the government actually shut down for a few weeks or a few days or something. Where do you stand on the 5-year murder hornet eradication plan? Oh, forgot about those guys? Yeah, they're still around.
Wait, there's a 5-year plan?
There's a 5-year plan.
I want to hear this 5-year plan.
Oh, I don't know the 5-year plan, but it's in the bill.
Shit.
It's a 5-year murder hornet eradication pilot.
That is fucking hilarious. So what do? You just like mass breed the little bees that know how to like go shake their asses on the big murder hornets and make them die? Is that the plan?
So what it was allocating funds to the states that have been impacted, which if I recall from last year was like Washington and maybe Alaska, maybe Oregon, but that Northwest area.
Yeah.
And so they're trying to help the states fight that.
And then you teach your normal bees how to twerk, and that's how they kill the big bees.
Yeah, I think that's the whole goal here, right?
Can you imagine what that looks like? You got like a beekeeper in a full beekeeper thing, like trying to teach these bees how to shake their ass.
Marshall, that is not what I said. That's not how you do it. Get the fuck out.
Ladies and gentlemen, what your taxpayer dollars are going to. You know what? Fuck it. Screw this podcast. I want to go teach bees how to twerk. That sounds fun as fuck.
For anybody that doesn't really get the reference here, bees, honeybees, have a pretty cool way of dealing with hornets. And what they'll do, I think hornets in general, but could be murder hornets.
Okay,
but,
maybe.
They will use their numbers in their advantage because obviously the murder hornets come in here and they will just wreak havoc on a hive. And I mean, they can wipe an entire hive of thousands of bees in an hour. And so what the bees will do is they'll all just congregate around the murder hornet and they'll vibrate their wings and flex their little booties like Tony was talking. And what it does is it creates a heat ball in between all of the bees and it just essentially cooks the hornet until the hornet's dead and then they move on to their next one. Pretty badass. Bees are awesome.
Yeah, it's like...
Save the bees.
It's like a great big hug mob that kills people. We're not going to let you go until you overheat and die.
What a shitty way to die.
Well, I mean, there's worse ways. Like, you could drown. If I'm going to die, I want to die being hugged by a bunch of strangers who hate me. You know what I mean? Like, there's worse ways to die. At least there's an illusion of appreciation.
I don't think that hornets see it that way.
Yeah, I know, but
I like it.
Moving on. What the fuck else was in this bill?
Some other things that I saw were more about like fighting. I don't even want to call it domestic terrorism because they specifically labeled the Chinese Communist Party and Russia and stopping their influence. There was, man, I stopped reading after a while because there were just so many different articles dedicated to just that, stopping influence there. Research on other countries, a lot of reports. They were concerned about some things going on in Azerbaijan, but I'm just breezing through all of these surface level topics because who's got time to dive into all of this?
Right.
This is wild.
Yeah, I can't even imagine, man. And here's my ignorance talking. Do you just throw money at stopping a country? Like, did they have shit listed out, or did you not even get that far into it?
Well, a lot of it was more about like research and reports and intelligence.
Okay.
As opposed to
actionable items.
Yes.
Okay.
And probably because they keep those under confidentiality.
A little bit more close to the chest.
Yeah.
Hey, other countries who are going to stop, here's our plan to stop you.
Right.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of what they're saying. They're like, yeah, we're talking about some of our formidable foes, and we need to stop the spread of communism. And God bless, if that doesn't take you back to the 70s and 80s, I don't know what does. Like, I'm reading this and I'm like, is this... Sure, I get it. You want to protect your society, the system that you have in place, and obviously it's under siege all the time, just like Russia's communism is under siege all the time by us, and it's just a constant battle. And I just don't understand why... Now I feel like I'm ranting. I don't understand why this is something that we're trying to like combat. Like, if the American population wants to go to communism, it's a democracy. Let them vote for fucking communism. Like, I'm not an advocate for that at all. And there are inherent flaws in that, just like there are inherent flaws in a republic or any other system.
Yeah, I think it's arrogant at the core on both sides of the fence to say my ideology is best. And I know the intention behind that isn't necessarily arrogance. It's more, hey, I think I found something that makes the world a better place. Let's share it with everybody. But why can't we just have our idea and live that way and respect someone else's perspective, even if it is fucked? They're living that. You're not.
Right.
You know, like, why don't we leave China the fuck alone and China leave us the fuck alone and we'll just be happy, you know? But instead we have to constantly do all these moves to try to influence and change people to our different perspective instead of trying to find a way to celebrate someone else's perspective. And I know that's kind of a loaded statement and how dare you try to celebrate? Maybe just live and let live, you know? Mm-hmm. Why does it have to be this big charged fucking thing?
Again, I'm just going to repeat this. I'm happy that I'm not in the Senate because this just isn't my concern. Like, that's not what I wake up and want to think about.
Right. Yeah, I want to think about not that. But here we are having to think about it because we talk about hard shit that people don't want to think about. Here we are.
Yeah, so, you know, that's what's included in the omnibus bill. I didn't read through the whole thing. Just really want to make sure that everybody understands this. But the time that I did spend going through it, I didn't come across a lot of the details around how we're spending money in foreign countries and providing foreign aid and stuff like that. I totally understand the stance that a lot of people are having right now, which is we feel like we got the $1,200 stimulus bill earlier in 2020. Mm-hmm. They passed the $600 and it's like, yeah, you're feeling the hurt from that because it's like, oh, you're giving us half. And first of all, nobody's guaranteed any money. So
right.
We can just be grateful for what we're receiving. There's a whole nother financial element that's a topic for another day, but we can be grateful for that. But when you look at how the government spends money abroad and not on its own people that are obviously facing hardship, it really calls into question the morality of the government or the purpose of our tax dollars, calls into question how we're being represented.
Well, and then you compare contrast with and again, everyone has different budgets and stuff, but you compare contrast with other developed countries who gave sometimes $1,000, $2,000 a month for the past year to keep people afloat and moving on. And, you know, you've got back and forth ideas on should not have had lockdowns, and people didn't respect that. Well, we got to go out and work so we can keep eating because you didn't pay us to stay home. You know, well, it's kind of valid. I get that.
It's absolutely valid.
And so it's hard when you're looking at other countries going, well, they got paid all this extra money in these hard times. And you look at a lot of the industries that have, you know, a lot of restaurants, you know, then servers, people in the music industry have not been able to make, unless they've shifted careers, so much less or no money at all. And then you still got to live somewhere and you still got rent and bills and expenses. Well, how do you pay all that when you've got no income and your industry is completely shut down and put on pause for almost a year at this point?
Yeah, I got a couple thoughts on that. The one, if you can't compare your country to other countries because some countries are fiscally responsible and some aren't. Right. And we are definitely not fiscally responsible, hands down. We abuse the hell out of our reserve currency status. You look at countries like Norway, which is one of the countries that I think you might be talking about, because I think they had issued like $2,000 a month or something like that.
There was a list. There were several.
And I don't know if that's 2,000 US dollars or 2,000 Norway dollars. I really don't know.
Either way.
But they have a much better financial situation than the US government does. So if you have a nest egg saved up, you can spend more on using that nest egg.
Yeah.
So that's my thought on comparing to other countries. Like, I just don't think that you can do that without really going through it with a fine-tooth comb.
I don't disagree with you at all. I was more painting the picture of, you know.
Well, this is what the American population sees.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And I agree. Like, it totally makes sense. The other thing on the you mentioned specifically like an entertainment industry. And as I'm reading through the omnibus bill, I had come across certain appropriations depending on the industry where they're trying to keep theaters and art studios and things like that alive.
Yep.
And that's kind of bundled in with the small medium business loans that they've been issuing, but those specific industries get more. So I think that gives me some confidence that they really actually spent some time thinking about this. I think you thought about it in just an instant, so I'm not saying that too much credit is due, but it's in there.
Right. Well, if we talk about the foreign stuff for a minute, well, it's probably more than a minute. But again, that perception of, oh, we're sending this one-time influx of cash in a crisis moment into our country. Why are we sending crisis money to other people? Again, separating the stimulus portion from that omnibus keeping the government rolling. Realizing,
I'm sorry, so is this included in the stimulus bill then?
No.
Okay.
But because the omnibus and the stimulus were signed together, the perception is that the stimulus was this one-time thing, not something we do every year that it's attached to.
Gotcha.
And so with that perspective, you're thinking, why the fuck are we sending hundreds of millions and billions of dollars to all these other countries? And why are we sending so much less in comparison to our own? That's kind of blood boiling. Like, what the fuck are you doing, people who I elect and pay lots of tax money to take care of me? What the hell's going on? When we realize that, oh, this is just normal funding that we're refunding or reallocating spending for, it's not as damning, but it begs to question, why are we sending all this money to other countries? Like, what's the value in that? Do you have any thoughts or perspective there?
Well, it's hard for me to without having like specific numbers, but I just did some quick maths and 1, 2, 3, that can't be right. So if you have 330 million Americans, and let's say half of those are eligible for the stimulus.
Sure.
And it's probably more than half because dependents are counted, but they say eligible dependents, and I don't know what the eligibility is. But let's just call it an even 150 million. If everybody gets a $600 check, that's going to be 600, 900 million with 2 more zeros.
So what, 90
so
billion?
that'd be 90 billion. So $90 billion. And that's a lowball number.
Right.
Is
and I
being
think
allocated.
the number that I saw in the breakdown was 166 billion in direct checks was allocated
to the American population.
Correct.
Gotcha. Do you know, like, what are some of these numbers that have been thrown around for the international expenses?
Let me pull it back up. I had it up earlier.
But so, I mean, we're talking about, just while you're looking that up, we're talking about a $900 billion bill, and $140 billion is direct stimulus to the American people.
And a lot of those other breakdowns were for, let me pull the notes back up here. Another 120 billion of that was to the unemployment help. So extending the unemployment benefits to like March 14th. Mm-hmm. Another 325 billion was that small business boost that we were talking about. Of that 15 billion for the struggling live venues, which makes me so happy because when all this is said and done, I want to go see some live music so fucking bad.
And just on if I can let my bias free here, come to Nashville, baby. You got so many nice small venues that you'll just be surprised to find the talent when you go through the city. I mean, just hole in the wall, and you'll have somebody in there that's just crushing it. And then other times, like Pink just randomly shows up and is like, "Hey, can I have the stage?" It's like,
tangential conversation to your tangential conversation. What's your favorite venue in Nashville?
Oh man. I can't say that I've been to a whole lot.
Okay.
In my mind, I think of like a lot of just random bars and pubs that have live bands come in. But I didn't really start doing concerts frequently until 2019. Yeah, and then 2020 happened.
You had a short string.
I had a lot lined up for 2020. But I don't know. I'd say that the best talent that I've seen, like when I've just walked in and been like, holy shit, those guys are good, was at Tootsie's, which is world famous.
Yeah,
so
pretty
no
historic.
Surprise. Yeah.
For me, my favorite place that I've been to is called The End. and it's this tiny, shitty little hole in the wall that I used to play metal, so I was into all that hardcore music. And you go into the bathroom, and I have never seen so much stickers and graffiti. It's completely trashed, but there's a beauty in that. The walls, when you go out, it's so grungy and dirty and awful, and that's, I guess, what makes it wonderful. But yeah, that's my favorite place to go because it's a tiny little place. Tickets are usually pretty cheap, and you got local stuff, or sometimes national acts will come through that are a little smaller. But yeah, it's the quintessential like shithole venue. It's amazing.
Yeah, I'm not a big fan of the like big outdoor stadiums like Nissan Stadium. They'll do concerts there, or what's the one right downtown? Ascend.
Yeah, the amphitheater.
Yeah. They're fine. They're great to go see some concerts, and they usually have big acts there because they hold a shit ton of people, and so it totally makes sense. But in terms of like the acoustics, the experience, the environment, it's just not it for me.
Right. Coming back to this bill, before we do, when all this is all said and done, if you're not from Nashville, come visit Nashville. We got cool music. But yeah, coming back to this bill, yeah, I think.
Whoa, I'm sorry to interrupt you.
No,
are you
ahead.
still drinking this tea?
Yeah.
How are you not? It's effectively lava.
Well, I drink tea a lot.
Gotcha.
You're sitting over here like, how are you drinking this, bro? I mean, if you look at this though, there's only an inch of it gone. I've been sipping it, so like. If you're watching on YouTube, you're seeing what's going on.
I'm sorry for everybody who's listening. I'm just curious now.
For everyone else.
Whew. I took my first sip, and oh man, I am lit up. That is hot.
Tea noob.
Yeah, I guess so. And we both have the same cup, so it's like,
Yeah.
Equivalent thermodynamics going on here.
We've gotten so off topic.
Tony,
I
what
love
were you
it.
talking about with that bill, man?
We were talking about the different things that was being allocated in it for different aspects, and like I think the foreign aid is kind of where we were on, and how some of that might actually be valuable in a normal aspect. And again, this is coming from an uneducated plebe who knows very little about how to effectively run a government. But in my mindset, I think we're not just handing money away for nothing. There's obviously a trade away or something that's being gained in that. And a little bit of stuff that I saw, a lot of these dollar amounts were predicated on certain circumstances being met. So we're sending money to Egypt, and Egypt, you've done X, Y, and Z. We want you to maintain this level of whatever. If you do during this time frame, you get this $40 million. So we're not just handing money away. We're paying for people's good behavior and other things. So when you look at it that way, and again, if you agree, disagree, the value in it is we're keeping the world the way we want it or think it should be from that government perspective. And that's where a lot of this money's going. So it's maintaining a status quo, and that's where that money's going. So I think there's some value in that. It's not as damning as like, why the fuck are we just sending money to other countries for no good reason?
Right. Yeah, that makes perfect sense. And then I would imagine, I don't know for sure, but I would imagine that some of that money is going to fund military activities for other countries. Obviously, we've got just a ridiculously large military, and again, that's a whole nother conversation.
Right.
But it's out there, and you have to be able to offload some of the burden that's being put on our troops overseas and support different military endeavors from different countries. And a lot of those countries are obviously going to be our allies that we're sending money to help, like you said, maintain the status quo, keep peace in different areas, and exert our dominance in others.
I'll be honest, man. Like, sometimes it's hard enough to manage spending one person's money and managing income and out of that. I can't even imagine like massively scaling that to a whole fucking countries. Like,
well, and then the complexity of a global macro economy.
right.
Like, that's a big ask, a tall order. Obviously, you're going to make some people upset. You're going to make some people happy. you're not going to make 330 million Americans all pleased with a decision that's been made as part of a 5,600 page bill.
Right.
It's just a tall order. So there's going to be controversy, but I think I think we have to approach our leadership with the understanding that they've got our best interest in mind. And I think that's what we all hope for. But I think that a lot of the scrutiny comes from feeling slighted in the past throughout various different events that have occurred.
Right. And then you add, the past year that we've all experienced, which has been an extreme heightened state of stress from this looming threat that's constantly around. And then you add the financial aspect of it and wanting something turned around super quick. People are going to have extra scrutiny, extra lack of faith because shit didn't work out the way we expected and it's been a hard fucking year. And so we're going to look into this super hard when we might not have looked into stuff this hard before because the world was operating in the way we were content with. And so we didn't need to dig deep. And then now we're digging deep and seeing all the shit that we could have looked at and raised a flag at before, but haven't. So who's the problem on? Is that on us for not doing our due diligence, or is that the government for doing what they've always done?
Yeah, I think what we've seen, let me back up. I think a lot of the rise that's come up from some of the memes that we talked about earlier isn't unwarranted.
Oh, I agree.
I totally understand it, but I think it's nothing new. And so if this is something that we want to hang our hats on and go to war against and change the process of all of these earmarks that get thrown into different bills, then we've got a long battle ahead of us. And I think it's a valiant battle to take. Like, I really do.
Absolutely. But I think if you're going to go in and actually change something, you have to be aware of it and not this is this one thing and they're trying to do all this shit. Well, maybe they are doing a bunch of shit, but it's not the first time and it's pretty consistent. And as you can see, this happened last year, maybe the year before that. This is a pretty consistent thing. So why don't we look at the root of the problem and fix that instead of pointing the finger at, what they did in the end of 2020 when everyone was at a heightened state of stress from a crazy fucking year.
Yeah, and we talked a lot about foreign expenses and sending money overseas, and this isn't something that is unique to the United States. I had come across a breakdown of the UK government's treasury statements, and they had, just to call it a round number, it was really close to 1 billion pounds spent. So about, I just did the conversion here, about 1.35 trillion US dollars. I said billion just a second ago. I meant trillion. So they've spent $1.3 trillion total. And of that, about 13 trillion, God bless, about 13 billion.
So about 1%.
Yes, went to foreign aid and sending money abroad to some of their allies, and just like what we've done. I don't know if you saw like a proper breakdown of the total amount.
What I've heard in some of the stuff that I was reading today was that although this foreign stuff looks fucking insane and like big dollar amounts, because I don't know the last time you've seen $1 billion personally, but it's been a long time for me. So seeing hundreds of billions of dollars really freaks me the fuck out that we're sending to another country. Oh, in great context though, historically, we really only send about 1% of our budget to this foreign aid stuff.
Is that true for us?
Yep.
Okay.
That's
so
at least that's what I was
like
understanding. So that 1% balanced, 1% of your whole budget, that's not insane.
Right. And not that the UK has to be a gold standard or America has to be a gold standard. Maybe 1% is still too much or too little. It could go either way, but I think it's all in your specific interests. But just for a contextual sense, the last fiscal year, which a fiscal year for the U.S. government is October 1st through September 30th.
Sounds right, yeah.
And we had a $6.5 billion worth of expenses. So, did I just fuck up the billions again?
Yeah.
because the numbers are in billions, but it's 6,552 billions. So $6.5 trillion.
I was like, damn, how did we go to the dollar store on our budget this year for the country?
Goodness gracious, what a struggle. And to be clear, I'm drinking a little bit of whiskey. I've had like 3 sips of this whiskey.
Nick's a lightweight, kids.
Woo! Yeah, that's not it. But $6.5 trillion is what we spent. And you compare that to, let's call it 1.3 trillion for the UK, which for the size of their country, that's pretty large.
Yeah. So in conclusion, on the foreign aid piece, without any prior knowledge or context, it seems pretty crazy. But then as you dig into it, it's not as clickbaity as it seemed.
Yeah, I think it just doesn't deserve the knee-jerk reaction that a lot of people have had. But I understand
I do completely
why it blew up in such a big way. But just fast forward to, next week, and it'll be a whole different news cycle, and we'll have some different stories to talk about.
Yep. And the more we allow ourselves to get knee-jerked, the more they sell their ads, and it works. So now we understand the real reason. But anyway.
Yeah, absolutely. And these are unprecedented times. You said this earlier about the stimulus bill in particular, and included in that were also a lot of other measures about, allocating resources to the CDC and, different government agencies that are going to help distribute vaccines. And it's a much broader bill than stimulus money. And I know that's what directly impacts our everyday lives, is that $600 check that we hope to get. But 140 billion of the total 900 billion is a drop in the bucket compared to the broader bill.
Right.
And so there's a lot more positive good that's coming out of it. Probably a lot of shenanigans going on in it as well. But I think it just puts things into context. And it was helpful for me, at least, to spend the time looking at it and dissecting some of the numbers and understanding what else is going on.
Right.
And that kind of, it appeases my thoughts.
Definitely. Because nothing sucks worse than having the year that we've had and then having the feeling like, oh, the government's trying to screw me on top of my shitty year.
Right.
Fuck this. Oh, well, maybe it wasn't that same perspective. But again, when you're in that hyper state of awareness and this extended fight or flight stress, constantly looking for what the next threat is, something that comes in that's probably inconvenient and your guns blazing going, what the fuck is that? Oh, let's chill out, people. Everyone's stressed out. Take a couple deep breaths. It's going to be all right.
Yeah, we going to be all right, fam.
Yeah.
Man, did you come across anything else that was particularly interesting in the bill?
No, not in the time that I had to spend reading it. And I think you got further in the 5,600 pages than I did. But just that reading Harry Potter all the way through twice. Holy shit.
So I do have a question. I think the vast majority of us would agree that that's an unreasonable ask to read 5,600 pages in, let's call it 2 weeks.
Sure.
Let alone have an argument and state your facts and your opinion and your position on complex issues among 100 or 99 other senators. That's a tall order, a big ask, and I think it's unreasonable. So what would you expect to change if you had a magic wand and you could wave it?
Fuck, bro.
Because here's the reality of the situation. Each one of these individual 100 senators that we have in the U.S. is responsible for a specific district or a specific. They're having to represent specific states, right? And they have to keep their people's interests in mind. And so that's where I think you see a lot of earmark spending. It's out of the. You hope that it's out of the good nature of that senator saying, hey, let's use Pennsylvania as an example. We talked about the coal miners. Mm-hmm. Coal is a big industry up there. and from what I understand. And if you represent constituents in Pennsylvania, you're going to try to push for federal funds to be allocated to the coal mines and miners, which happened. That's actually part of the bill. And I can't fault them for trying to go for something like that. Like, I think that's completely reasonable, but I think the question is like, well, who's getting more than their fair share?
Sure.
And then that's where you get into this messy debate. Senators don't agree with other senators, even through the party lines, like just amongst each other. I would imagine that causes some tension.
Well, and then how do you diffuse tension? Well, let me give you something else in return. And I think there's a line of that's okay. And maybe it's concessions on certain aspects of the bill, but then it gets into the weird shit with like lobbying and,
When you've got personal interests, like real personal interests.
Well, you know what? If you give me some kicks, why don't you give me a weekend on your island? Or, you know, you've got this hookup over here, and then I'll give you what you want on your bill. And none of that's official or documented, but we all know it fucking happens. It's just so goddamn complex. And how do you even go about trying to fix that? And I think it's unrealistic to try to put a group of humans together who all have different interests and expect that shit not to happen. I think we would all hope, and I'm pretty fucking altruistic, but I just don't see that being a reality. Can you?
No, are you asking if I think that it could be a reality that you put 100 people in a room with competing interests and they all agree on everything?
That they don't do shady shit to try to pull those interests.
I don't think it's realistic just because I don't have that much faith in humanity. I generally think humans are innately good, but that is a tall order.
Well, you have to think about these too. Like, most of these people are highly intelligent, motivated individuals. And so I know for myself, I can't get in this way. Let me try another angle. Let me try another angle. Let me try another angle. Well, if I run out of legal angles to go, and I'm still trying to do what's good for either myself or the people I represent, let me do another angle.
So, and you see where that comes into. It plays off of the concept of the greater good.
Right.
And that's always just going to be a philosophical dilemma to begin with. Like, is it, and for anybody who might not be familiar with the term, you probably are, but like, to give you a scenario, if you control a train track system and you've got a train coming out of split and there's a car in the split, and you can flip the switch and it might derail a train full of, you know, thousands of passengers, or you can leave the track where it's headed and the train's going to plow through the car. What do? Do you save the car? Do you save the train? And so it's like, you got to do what's for the greater good. And so I get that. I think that we just maybe we hold our politicians to an unreasonable expectation. However, that unreasonable expectation also comes with being a representative of everybody. We expect perfection because we voted out of 330 million people, 100 people to go in there and represent us. And you expect that these are going to be the best 100 people.
It's been a few episodes since I quoted this, and I feel like it's time again. With great power comes great responsibility, man. Like, that's just it. We've given you great power. Be fucking responsible with it.
And you know, I've never really put much thought into the conversation about term limits because, you know, you've got politicians that have been in there for 30 or 40 years, but maybe that's a reasonable thing to ask because people who hold power for decades have a trend of abusing it.
And so
you build your network beyond that as well. You know what you can get away with.
Well, and flip the coin on that, because I know the space so well and I know how to move shit so well. Sometimes that can make me move my interests quicker because I'm not having to re-navigate the water. So if and maybe that's not all healthy, but if we do put in these term limits, do we slow our politics way down? Because now everyone's having to re-navigate the waters, or would it actually speed shit up because people don't know how to do shit sideways so smoothly.
What's so bad about slowing the fuck down?
Yeah, that's fair too.
Like so to actually try to answer my own question, in a year like 2020, you want to be nimble.
Yeah, absolutely.
So that holds water. But I would argue that the reality is that 2020 is obviously way out of the ordinary.
It's an exception.
And so would it have been nice to have even a more nimble system? Absolutely. In 2020, you have to be able to. But I think for the overall general consensus, I would say is that slow down. Like, we don't have to move at the speed of light. Things happen fast in our everyday lives, but when you look at it from a 30,000 foot perspective at what the U.S. government has to do, be deliberate, be intelligent about your actions, and it's okay to slow down.
Well, I think that just comes to a culture thing. Everything's just gotten faster and faster and faster over the past couple hundred years, and it's just been getting exponential. And to the point now where we're conditioned for shit to be there 10 seconds after we want it. You know, we get pissed off like, what the fuck? I'm having to wait 2 minutes in line at McDonald's. Hold up. You ordered food and 3 minutes later it's there and you're pissed about it?
Yeah, and it was 2 years ago that we had at best 2-day shipping.
Yeah.
Now we've got same day. You can order something on Amazon and get it in 3 hours. You're like, done.
The only way this shit gets quicker is if we get those cool little machines where you press a button and say, computer, chocolate milkshake. And it's there.
Yes.
You know, like, you can't get faster than that. Like, the only way to get faster than that is to have a desire and it appear before it's even fully manifested as a desire.
Hold on. We're talking about the whole McDonald's situation.
Yeah.
I just want to give a quick round of applause to Chick-fil-A because they figured that whole thing the fuck out. They have. I've never seen a line move faster than that.
Chick-fil-A is not a sponsor.
No.
Just throwing that out there.
No. They would never want to be, and that's okay. But I do love their food. They got some damn food.
Yeah.
That's Jesus food right there.
That's Jesus food. See, for me, controversial opinion, I don't think Chick-fil-A's food is as good as everyone cracks it up to be. However, I think their experience is really where they excel. And because I'm in such a heightened state from the great experience I have, I associate that to the food and assume the food is as good as everyone hypes it to be. But it's all about the experience.
Sure, yeah, and I've heard other people be wrong as well, but I'm kidding. I'm totally
God
kidding.
damn, Nick.
Totally kidding. But no, you're right. I think it is. I think what makes Chick-fil-A successful is exactly what you said. I think it's the experience that they deliver because you see that long ass line and you're not intimidated by it.
Yep.
Because you know you're going to get in and out and you're going to get a thank you for showing up, and it's their pleasure that you're there. Like, they don't feel burdened that you're there. They are.
And even if it's just Xanax, I still feel good from there. Like, thanks so much for coming.
Yeah. I'm ready to go read the Bible when I get home.
Yes. Well, shit. I think we've exhausted the bill talk because now here we are ranting about Chick-fil-A.
Talking about chicken filet. Hey, I had one more thought that I just wanted to drop in here. That is stimulus bill related, or more so around the conversation that we were having on how do you solve this. And one thought that's been on my mind for a long time has been about lobbying, because when I was young, like in high school, I thought about lobbying, and it's obvious that it's got its inherent flaws. And I was like, but how do you stop that? Like, how do you stop somebody from getting money? You can make it illegal, but obviously you can find workarounds and find ways to make money legal, or like you stay at my resort and overpay. There are just so many ways to do this. And the only solution that I've come up with is coming out of what I saw from the Constitutionalists Party. Obviously, that's a really small third party that operates here in the United States, and I don't subscribe to them per se, but they had a solution, which is that if you look at the way that the U.S. Constitution is written, which is outdated, and let's revise it, but the 10th Amendment says that all the powers that were not allocated to the federal government from the U.S. Constitution are by default given to the state. And if you think about that, that means that things like regulating marijuana, the education system, all that type of stuff would be unconstitutional. And there could be other amendments because there are 20-something amendments. And so some of those could be ratified by those other amendments that I'm not familiar with. But it's just things like that that should be left up to the states, but the federal government has expanded its power in such an overt way that it can influence oil companies and just all these different aspects. And so what that does, that in and of itself isn't what gives problem to lobbying, but it makes the federal government able to regulate industries that lobbyists have interest in. And so if you go back to the Constitution and you are very strict about regulating the powers that the federal government has, then I don't care how much money you're offering me if I'm a senator, I don't have power about that.
Right. And so I think that is a potential solution, but then again, it opens up other problems when shit gets wild. And I mean, we see it right now, the ongoing conversation with big tech and what level of censorship is okay. Where is that line? Do we say the federal government can't do anything and they can run wild and whatever they say goes, or do we get involved? Like, that's a whole conversation, but that's the trade-off on that too. So it's very complicated in my opinion.
It is a whole nother conversation, but my just immediate response is it goes back to we can slow down. You can make an amendment and do things the right way.
That's
and
fair.
Say like, yeah, social media companies are a private business. And I've talked to you. I like the idea of privatization. I tend to be kind of I'm not a private person, but I just want to be in control of my own life. But I also think that I can see a dystopian future that starts from the power of these big tech companies. Right. And so that's where you just make an amendment. And I feel like, I don't know if it's laziness or what, but it's not happening that way anymore.
Yeah. And I think it's that calculated thought. And I think it's probably a combination of different things. One, like you mentioned, we're running too fast to have a thought on how does this work in 10 years, in 100 years. Like you had mentioned earlier, the shit that was written a couple hundred years ago was for that world. And we don't live in that world anymore. And I don't think we've gotten to the point where let's adjust and address that because we're moving too damn fast. With the thoughts of, okay, we know this isn't going to be solid and work today for forever. So how does it evolve? How do we give room for it to healthily evolve in tomorrow's world where it's still going to be valuable and helpful instead of something that's outdated and exploitable?
Yes. Yep. That's exactly what I think. I think it is time that we slow down. And the more and more power that the federal system has, the faster it's going to feel because they have to maintain all these different aspects, just like we've talked about this entire episode.
Yeah.
And if you just put that in check and say okay, what are the things that we really want to get from our federal government? And like I said earlier, I'm pretty sure that per the 10th Amendment, the education system would be technically illegal. I'm not advocating that we don't have a federally funded education system. That's not what I'm saying.
But it's just an example for conversation's sake. Yeah.
Just make an amendment and call it what it is. Be explicit about it. Don't try to lump everything under the federal government provides for the common welfare or whatever the terminology is in the Constitution, because I think that's where a lot of people go, and I get it. But let's just be deliberate and precise about the language that we use in our law so that we can all be bound to transparent thoughts and governing.
Do you think that in today's day and age, some of this shit gets harder? Because fast forward a few hundred years ago, there was no level of communication like we have now. So whoever you sent off and elected, and they were gone for 6 months doing their thing, and maybe you got a letter back with an update, and that update was what they wanted to send you. not all of the details and different angles of perspective of what's happening, that now me as an individual, I'm trying to having to sort through all these perspectives to see what's truth and to see what I align with or, disagree with, or what's propaganda or what's whatever. And then every individual is now forcing to have to do that. And then it's just getting crazy. There's just so much information. And then whether it's accurate or inaccurate information, now you're leaving so many people feeling unrepresented. And maybe they aren't unrepresented. It's just the feeling of that. And now everything's fucking chaos. Like, how do we fix that aspect? Because before, I think the system worked very well and it was easy to, cool, Nick, go take care of this for me. We collectively nominate you. Go make sure that our town is good to go. Okay, gotcha, guys. And you went in and you advocated for your town or your state or your collective. And we weren't privy to a lot of those conversations that actually happened. And so whatever happened there was a bigger trust because we didn't have visibility. Now we do have visibility and we see a lot of the corruption and lobbying and all of how it really works. And we're going, what the fuck? This never how it used to. No, I think this is probably how a version of it always was.
Yeah.
Now we're just aware. So how do we balance that awareness with our rose glasses perception of a previous reality?
Tony, that's a great question, man.
Do we end there?
I don't think anybody's going to have a proper answer for you. I certainly don't.
But I think that's one of the questions of our generation that we need solving.
Yeah, we have information overload. The nice thing is that you do get transparency on this because, just like you said, if you think about the 1800s or hell, anytime before 1980, all of this stuff, you had to go to a library at best, let alone go to Washington, D.C. to get the documents to understand what your representatives were doing over the past 4 years or 2 years or whatever terms are. And now I'm able to do a quick Google search. I find a .gov website that tells me that this should be an official source. I can browse the exact bill that they've quote unquote debated. And I can read through it myself. I'm not, but I could. And I like that. I like that we've got that sense of transparency. That's definitely a net good.
Yeah.
But with that, to your point, comes all the scrutiny that's involved. And while every single person may not read the entire document, I'm sure every single page of that 5,600 page bill is being read by somebody. And that somebody, even if they only read 2 of the pages, posts a thought about those 2 pages, and then somebody else posts about their 30 pages worth of thoughts. And that's how you get this kind of spiral, and you get a lot of quick reactions without understanding the full context. And I think the way to solve that is going to take a more educated population. And I don't mean like you go to school and get educated. I mean, you sit down and you be thorough and you actually care about what you're reading about.
Yeah.
And don't try to promote things for clickbait, which we're monetarily incentivized to do. Mm-hmm. So we've just got competing odds.
Yeah. It's it'll be interesting to see how this shakes out in the next 10 years or so. How this evolves and develops, because I think we're close to this critical mass of what social media is becoming. And then there's so many people getting wary of it and going, yeah, you know what, I might just disconnect. And I know more and more people who have gone, yeah, I'm just off of social media. I'm off of all of these things. And so it's almost like we're reverting back to where we don't have this quick communication and stuff bouncing around as fast as it was happening with social media. And so I'm curious to see what the next iteration of that looks like.
Can you say, if you're on Instagram or whatever social media account you subscribe to, there are obviously reputable and unreputable sources. And if you really want to be diligent about this issue that we're talking about, look at the last 5 topics of, let's just call if you follow some political channels, really any channel, it doesn't have to be a about politics, but it's easy to talk about the political channels. If you follow somebody who's posting a lot of political statements, fact check, really explore their last 5 posts. And if they pass that, keep following them.
Sure.
If they don't, they haven't fact checked their own information, unsubscribe.
Well, the hard part about that is I'm not just looking when I'm on my Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, whatever. The idea, or at least how it started, it was a social network. I wasn't there to necessarily get my information. I was there to connect with my circle, my friends, family. Well, then you know what? I'm super into Tom Cruise. Let me see what he's up to. Let me check out this other person. And then that's where it starts growing. And then you get, this new genre of people, of influencers who prior to social media were pretty much nobodies, but now they've created an audience. And so some of those, it's easy to unfollow or unsubscribe. But when it's my brother, when I still like half of the content he shows about my nieces or nephews, but the other stuff, how do you filter some of that? And I think that's where it gets muddy and not as easy to just unfollow and unsubscribe.
Yeah, I get that totally.
Or it comes at a cost if you do.
Just don't quote their posts.
I know, but I'm just saying as far as that information still
yeah.
coming in, and that's where this all gets difficult.
Much easier said than done.
Oh, hell yeah.
Yeah. It's a dilemma.
It is a dilemma. But one we'll probably cover a solution for in another episode.
Cheers to that. Cheers to solutions.
Hey, cheers. Cheers. Thanks for listening this week, everybody. I know we kind of bounced all over the place, but I know we wanted to conquer this hard to talk about topic, and hopefully it brings some greater perspective if you didn't understand like we didn't understand going into this. And we'll catch you next week.
Yeah, it's definitely a complicated one. Thanks for listening in.